The Alternatives to Violence program, also known as AVP, was begun in the mid-70s in response to riots in the New York prisons, such as the one at Attica.
It changed me tremendously in prison because I was a very angry individual, and violence was my outlet to my anger. But once I learned how to think through things and channel that anger into a positive outlet, it worked out better for me.
I was a part of an organization called the North Carolina Peace Resource Center, and we knew that we wanted to provide some kind of background information, resources. We wanted to help people learn how to resolve conflict nonviolently. So we invited some AVP facilitators to come and chat with us, and we were so impressed that we invited them to do the first AVP basic workshop at Jamestown Friends Meeting in the fall of 2017, and I've been very involved since then.
And we reach out into the community to help the less fortunate, if you will, the lower income, or the passed over to Kathy. It just all fell into place that, hey, that's what we want to do. We want to be able to communicate with the people in the way that AVP is talking about they communicate.
So the first one, my basic, I did in person at Jamestown Friends Meeting, and then I did advanced and training for facilitators online.
There was a guy that had come into mine and my celly's room, and he had stole something out of the room, and my celly was really mad about it because it was his. He was ready to go fight. And so at that instant, I just talked to him, and I diffused the situation with him. First of all, I calmed him down by letting him know, hey, if you resorting to fighting, it's going to get him put in the shoe, he's going to lose certain privileges, and you're not going to get your MP3 player back. And we went to the guy, and he said that, you know, he only took it because other guys had pressured him to take the MP3 player. It was part of getting initiated in something. And so it turned into a nasty situation in prison into, you know, a peaceful resolve.
One of my favorite stories about how AVP works occurred in a prison in North Carolina. I've been working in a prison in Alexander County, Taylorsville, and one evening we were involved with an AVP workshop, and a young man, one of the inmates, was suddenly accosted by a guard who took him out of the circle, took him out of the room, put him in handcuffs. And we were shocked. We had no idea why he had been taken out. In a few minutes, I guess about 30 minutes later, they brought the young man back and let him sit down, and he just took a deep breath and he said, "This program works." He said, "They accused me of something I had absolutely not done." And he said, "Before AVP, I would have cursed, I would have fought, I would have kicked them, I would have done everything that I knew to let them know how angry I was." He said, "But because of AVP, I just said, you know, guys, I didn't do that, and you'll need to look at the video to see that the evidence is there, I didn't do it." And they did, and then they brought him back, and he was able to finish the workshop.
And the thing about AVP is it just kind of brought to the forefront some things that we do in our regular life, or I do in my regular life, and I didn't know that it had a name or a title to it, especially some of the transforming power guidelines. I've been using that, but not knowing that it had a distinction, if you will. But being able to handle conflict type situations in a non-violent way or a non-offensive way to the other person, it happens quite often. One thing that I recognize that I do on a regular basis because of where my job is to talk with people with a calming voice when they are in a hyper tense situation, and I have to communicate with them. I try to slow it down, slow the conversation down, look them in the eye and pay attention to them, let them talk to me, and then I respond to what they're saying. So I learned in AVP that is one of the guidelines for transforming power, And
So I drive a truck, and I've done construction, and I was in the military, and like all of these things feel very like separate from what I'm doing now in social work and AVP and all of that. But it's helpful even in those settings, and I think to have that like gamut of experience where I often work with people who are like, what do you mean? You're like sitting around talking about feelings and stuff? And I'm like, you have no idea. Like, I use this stuff on you all the time. And it doesn't matter if you're someone who's like recently incarcerated or is currently incarcerated, or if you're a housewife, or if you're a student, or if you're actively employed or unemployed, but when we come together and we go through these exercises, you really feel connected to these people regardless, and you would never, if you ran into each other at the grocery store, you might not think that you have so much in common, but you really do.
My favorite exercise is the one that we do on the very first evening when we are forming community, and it's called concentric circles. Very simple. We divide the group into two separate groups. One group sits on an outer circle, one group sits on an inner circle facing the people on the outer side. And we give them prompts, very simple prompts. And then they switch places and the other person speaks. After we have done that on Friday evening, we have formed community, because the prompts go from very simple things to more deep things like, how did your family handle conflict when you were growing up? And the men and women make themselves vulnerable to each other, and by the time we finish on Friday night, as I said, they have formed community.
My favorite one is probably the broken squares, because that shows us how to communicate without, talking and the interaction, what another person may need, and we can offer that help.
But when you learn those skills and how to address those issues and sort of like find a way to meet in the middle, I think it can be incredibly helpful.
I actually like the transition of doing AVP workshops online. It's more convenient for the participants and the facilitators. They don't have to leave their home. They don't have to add an extra time to what their day is being interrupted for.
Light and livelies are great. Really get you up and doing something, which is important, especially on Zoom. Because they can be long days, but it works better online than I anticipated that it would.
If they have somebody that just will listen to them instead of always trying to offer them advice about how they would handle it, things get solved a little better for that person.
That regardless of how one enters into AVP, and if you're gonna go through the whole process and do basic and do advanced, it can be wildly valuable. In your own relationships, in the ways that you interact with others, in the ways that you interact with strangers. I think there's always something to gain.